Dr. Sarah Chun had seen everything in her 15 years working emergency medicine at St. Mary's Hospital. Car accidents, heart attacks, overdoses, gunshot wounds. Nothing surprised her anymore. At least, that's what she thought until the night a massive dragon landed in the hospital parking lot carrying a crying human baby. It started like any other Tuesday evening shift. The emergency room buzzed with its usual chaos. Nurses rushed between patients, monitors beeped constantly, and the coffee machine worked overtime. Sarah was treating a man with a broken arm when the building shook. Not the gentle tremor of a passing truck, but a deep, bone-rattling vibration that made the overhead lights sway. "What was that?" asked Jenny, the head nurse, looking up from her computer. Before anyone could answer, screams erupted from the parking lot. Through the automatic glass doors, Sarah glimpsed something impossible, a massive shadow blocking out the streetlights. She dropped her clipboard and ran outside, followed by half the emergency room staff. The dragon was magnificent and terrifying. Its scales shimmered deep blue-black in the fluorescent lights, each one the size of a dinner plate. It stood 30 feet tall, with wings that could easily span a football field. Golden eyes, ancient and intelligent, surveyed the growing crowd of hospital workers with what looked like patience. But what shocked everyone into silence was what the dragon held in its massive claws. Nestled carefully against its chest, protected by curved talons that could slice through steel, was a small bundle wrapped in white cloth. The bundle was crying, the unmistakable wail of a newborn baby. "Nobody move," whispered Dr. Martinez, the senior attending physician. "Nobody make any sudden movements." The dragon's head, larger than a small car, turned toward the sound of his voice. When it spoke, its voice resonated like distant thunder, but the words were clear and unmistakably human. "I seek medical assistance," the dragon said. "This human child requires immediate care." Sarah felt her medical training kick in despite the surreal situation. A baby was crying, which meant a baby needed help. The fact that it was being delivered by a dragon seemed almost secondary to that basic truth. "I'm Dr. Chun," she called out, taking a careful step forward. "What's wrong with the baby?" The dragon's massive head lowered slightly, bringing those ancient golden eyes level with Sarah's. Up close, she could see intelligence there, not animal cunning, but true awareness and concern. "The child was born during a difficult situation," the dragon explained. "The mother asked me to bring the baby to safety before she died. I believe the infant may be injured. I am not equipped to provide medical care for human young." "Okay," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Can you bring the baby inside? We have everything we need to help." The dragon looked at the automatic doors, then at its own massive frame. "I do not believe I will fit through your entrance." Sarah glanced back at the emergency room. The dragon was right. Even bending down, there was no way something that large could fit through the doors. But a baby's life might be at stake. "Can you set the baby down gently?" she asked. "I'll come to you." The dragon considered this for a moment, then, slowly, incredibly carefully, lowered itself to the ground. Its movements were precise and deliberate, like watching a master craftsman work with delicate materials. It placed the crying bundle on the asphalt with such gentleness that Sarah barely heard the cloth touch the ground. She approached slowly, hands visible, the way she might approach a frightened animal. Except this wasn't an animal. This was clearly an intelligent being who had just entrusted her with something precious. The baby was tiny, probably only days old, with a shock of dark hair and skin that was too pale. Sarah's experienced eyes immediately cataloged potential problems: possible premature birth, signs of distress, the urgent need for warmth, and proper examination. "I need to take the baby inside right now," she told the dragon. "Will you wait here?" "I will remain until I know the child is safe," the dragon replied. Sarah scooped up the bundle, noting how cold the baby felt even through the cloth wrapping. The infant's cries were weaker now, which worried her more than loud wailing would have. She turned toward the emergency room, then paused. "What's your name?" she asked the dragon. Those golden eyes blinked slowly. "I am called Keeper of the Sacred Flame." "But Your kind find my name difficult. You may call me Keeper. Thank you, Keeper, for bringing the baby to us. Sarah ran back into the emergency room, shouting orders as she moved. I need a pediatric bay, cleared now. Give me warming blankets for setup, and call Dr. Patel for pediatrics. The next hour passed in a blur of medical activity. The baby, a girl, they determined, was indeed premature and suffering from hypothermia and mild dehydration. Not life-threatening with proper care, but serious enough that the dragon's decision to bring her to the hospital had probably saved her life. While Sarah and the pediatric team worked, word spread through the hospital like wildfire. A dragon was in the parking lot. Staff members found excuses to walk past the windows. Security had called the police, who had called the National Guard, who had called someone else entirely. But the dragon simply waited, motionless as a statue, occasionally lifting its head when the wind carried the sound of the baby's cries from inside the building. Vitals are stabilizing, reported Dr. Patel as they moved the baby to a proper incubator. Temperature's coming up, heart rate is good. She's going to be fine. Sarah felt relief wash over her. She walked back to the window overlooking the parking lot. Keeper hadn't moved from his position, but his head turned toward the building as if he could sense her presence. She grabbed a portable microphone from the nurse's station and stepped outside. The parking lot was now surrounded by police cars, their red and blue lights painting the dragon's scales in shifting colors. Officers stood behind their vehicles, hands on weapons they probably knew would be useless against something that size. Keeper, Sarah called out. The baby is going to be okay. She was cold and hungry, but she's safe now. The dragon's head rose, and something that might have been relief flickered in those ancient eyes. You are certain? I'm certain. She's in our pediatric intensive care unit, being monitored constantly. She'll make a full recovery. Good, Keeper said. Then, to Sarah's surprise, the dragon began to settle down more comfortably on the asphalt, massive wings folding against its sides. Then, I will remain here until she is ready for adoption. Adoption? Sarah blinked. What do you mean? The child has no family, Keeper explained. Her mother died giving birth during an attack on their village. She asked me to ensure the baby found a good home among the humans. I intend to honor that promise. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Sarah could see military vehicles approaching from the highway. This situation was about to become much more complicated. Keeper, she said urgently, there are a lot of people coming who might not understand that you're trying to help. Some of them might try to force you to leave. The dragon's laugh was like distant thunder. Let them try. I have made a promise to a dying mother. I will not abandon this child until I know she is safe and loved. Sarah looked back at the approaching convoy of military vehicles, then at the dragon who had appointed himself guardian of an orphaned baby. She had a feeling that St. Mary's Hospital was about to become the center of the most unusual standoff in medical history. Inside the hospital, baby Jane Doe, as they'd officially labeled her, slept peacefully in her incubator, unaware that a dragon had declared himself a protector. Her tiny chest rose and fell steadily, and her color was returning to a healthy pink. In the pediatric ward, nurses took turns peeking in at her, whispering among themselves about the miraculous circumstances of her arrival. Dr. Martinez found Sarah in the break room an hour later, staring out the window at the scene in the parking lot. Military vehicles had indeed arrived, along with what looked like federal agents and people in suits who spoke into earpieces. The dragon ignored them all, massive head resting on his forelegs, eyes fixed on the hospital building. This is insane, Martinez muttered, pouring himself coffee. I've been practicing medicine for 25 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Have you ever seen a dragon before tonight? Sarah asked. Well, no, but then, how do you know this is insane? Sarah interrupted. Maybe this is just how dragons behave. Maybe protecting innocent children is normal for them. Martinez stared at her. Are you seriously defending a mythological creature that just landed in our parking lot? Mythological? Sarah gestured toward the window. That thing out there is as real as you or me. And it saved a baby's life tonight. I'd say that makes it one of the good guys. A commotion outside drew their attention. A man in a general's uniform was approaching Keeper, flanked by soldiers with rifles. Even from inside the building, they could hear the dragon's rumbling voice responding to whatever demands were being made. "This is General Morrison," the man was shouting. "You are ordered to vacate this area immediately." Keeper's head rose to its full height, looking down at the general from 30 feet above. "I'm not subject to your orders, human. I am fulfilling a sacred trust. The child remains under my protection until suitable guardians are found. You're disrupting hospital operations and frightening civilians." The hospital staff seemed quite capable of continuing their duties, Keeper observed calmly. "As for frightening civilians, perhaps you should examine which of us arrived with weapons drawn." Sarah couldn't help but smile at that. The dragon had a point. Despite his massive size and obvious power, Keeper had been nothing but polite and cooperative. The same couldn't be said for the growing military presence. "Dr. Chun," a voice called from the hallway. Sarah turned to see a woman in a black suit approaching, badge in hand. "I'm Agent Williams, FBI. I need to speak with you about your interaction with the entity in the parking lot." "The dragon's name is Keeper," Sarah said. "And he's not an entity. He's someone who brought a sick baby to the hospital for medical care." Agent Williams looked skeptical. "Dr. Chun, we need to understand what we're dealing with here. Has the creature made any demands? Threatened anyone?" "The only thing Keeper has demanded is that we take good care of the baby he brought us," Sarah replied. "Which, last I checked, is exactly what hospitals are supposed to do. But where did it come from? How do we know it's not dangerous?" Sarah looked out the window again. Keeper remained motionless despite being surrounded by dozens of armed personnel. His attention seemed focused entirely on the hospital building where the baby lay sleeping. "Agent Williams," Sarah said slowly, "if you had the power to level this entire building with a sneeze, but instead you gently delivered a dying baby to medical care and then waited patiently to make sure she was okay, what would that say about your intentions?" The agent frowned. "I'm not sure I follow. That dragon could have done anything when he arrived here. Anything at all. Instead, he asked for help saving a human baby. I'd say his intentions are pretty clear." Before Agent Williams could respond, Sarah's pager buzzed. "Emergency in pediatrics." She ran from the break room, leaving the agent standing there, and took the elevator up 2 floors. She found Dr. Patel in the pediatric ICU, looking concerned. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, immediately checking the baby's monitors. "Nothing medical," Dr. Patel said. "Her vitals are perfect. She's responding well to treatment. But look at this." He handed Sarah a tablet displaying the baby's brain activity monitors. The patterns were unlike anything she'd seen before. Not abnormal exactly, but more complex than typical for a newborn. "Her neural activity is off the charts," Dr. Patel explained. "Not in a dangerous way, but it's like her brain is operating at a much higher level than normal for her age. And watch this." He dimmed the lights in the room. Immediately, the baby's crying stopped, and she turned her head toward the window that faced the parking lot where Keeper waited. "She does that every time," Dr. Patel whispered. "It's like she knows he's out there." Sarah stared down at the tiny girl. In the dim light, she could swear she saw something unusual about the baby's eyes, a faint golden flicker that reminded her of Keeper's ancient gaze. "Dr. Patel," she said slowly, "I think this baby might be more special than we realized." Outside, as if responding to some unheard signal, Keeper's head rose and turned toward the pediatric ward. His golden eyes seemed to glow in the darkness, and for a moment, Sarah could have sworn she saw the dragon smile. The baby gurgled softly and settled back to sleep, one tiny hand reaching toward the window, as if she could sense the presence of her unlikely guardian. In the parking lot below, Keeper resumed his patient vigil, wings folded protectively against his sides. Whatever secrets this child carried, whatever the connection between her and the dragon who had saved her life, Sarah knew that their story was just beginning. The hospital had become the center of something much larger than a medical emergency, It had become the focal point of a mystery that would challenge everything humanity thought it knew about the world. As the night wore on, more officials arrived. Scientists, linguists, military advisors, and government representatives of every description. But through it all, Keeper remained exactly where he had settled, patient as stone, refusing all demands to leave until he was satisfied that the baby was truly safe. And in the pediatric ward, baby Jane Doe slept peacefully, her brain showing patterns that suggested she was far from ordinary, while her unlikely protector maintained his vigil in the parking lot below. 3 days had passed since Keeper's arrival at St. Mary's Hospital, and the situation had evolved into something no government manual had ever prepared anyone to handle. The parking lot resembled a military base crossed with a scientific expedition. Tents housed everything from communication equipment to portable laboratories, while researchers from a dozen different universities had arrived to study the first confirmed dragon in human history. Dr. Sarah Chun had barely left the hospital during those 3 days, splitting her time between caring for baby Jane Doe and serving as the unofficial liaison between the medical staff and the growing crowd of officials outside. The baby was thriving under their care, but the mystery surrounding her only deepened with each passing hour. Her cognitive development is accelerating at an impossible rate, Dr. Patel explained to a group of pediatric specialists who had flown in from across the country. Yesterday, she was tracking objects with her eyes like a 2-month-old. This morning, she's showing response patterns typical of a 6-month-old infant. Sarah stood at the back of the conference room, only half listening to the medical discussion. Through the window, she could see Keeper in his usual position. The dragon had moved only once in 3 days to allow a delivery truck to pass through the parking lot. Otherwise, he remained as still as a monument, his attention focused on the building where the baby rested. Dr. Chun called Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a geneticist from Stanford. You've spent the most time with both the infant and the dragon. Have you noticed any correlation between their behaviors? Sarah pulled her attention back to the meeting. What do you mean? Well, we've been monitoring both subjects remotely. There seems to be some kind of synchronization between the baby's sleep cycles and the dragon's periods of rest. When she's awake and alert, he's more active, head up, scanning the environment. When she sleeps deeply, he appears to enter something like a meditative state. You think they're connected somehow? Dr. Martinez consulted her tablet. The correlation is too consistent to be coincidental. We're seeing brain wave patterns in the infant that suggest some form of enhanced sensory perception, and the dragon's electromagnetic field fluctuates in rhythm with her neural activity. Agent Williams, who had taken up permanent residence in the hospital conference room, leaned forward. Are you suggesting some kind of telepathic link? I'm suggesting that we need to consider possibilities beyond our current understanding of biology, Dr. Martinez replied. This baby's DNA shows markers we've never seen before. Not mutations exactly, but variations that suggest her genetic line might be far older than modern humans. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Jenny in the emergency room. Dragon wants to talk to you. Says it's important. I need to step out, Sarah announced, already heading for the door. She took the elevator down to the ground floor and walked outside, nodding to the various officials who had become familiar faces over the past few days. Keeper's massive head turned toward her as she approached. Despite his size, Sarah no longer felt intimidated by the dragon. Over their brief acquaintance, she had come to see intelligence and even kindness in those ancient golden eyes. Dr. Chun, Keeper rumbled in his thunder-deep voice. I must speak with you about the child. Is something wrong? Her medical condition is excellent. Her medical condition, yes. But there are things about her nature that your people do not understand. Things that will become important as she grows. Sarah glanced around at the crowd of researchers and officials, all pretending not to eavesdrop, while obviously hanging on every word. Maybe we should talk privately? Privacy would be wise, Keeper agreed. But I cannot leave my post here. The child must remain under my protection. What if we brought her outside? Just for a few minutes. Keeper considered this. That would be acceptable. But only you. I do not trust the others with her safety. 20 minutes later, Sarah wheeled a portable incubator through the hospital doors, surrounded by nervous security guards and doctors. The baby was awake and alert, her unusually bright eyes taking in the world around her with what seemed like far too much awareness for a newborn. As soon as they emerged into the parking lot, the baby's behavior changed dramatically. She turned her head directly toward Keeper, made soft cooing sounds, and reached tiny hands toward the massive dragon. In response, Keeper's entire demeanor shifted. The ancient wariness in his eyes softened, and he lowered his great head until it was only a few feet from the incubator. "Hello, little star," he whispered in a voice gentle enough for a lullaby. "I have missed being close to you." The baby gurgled happily and seemed to be trying to reach through the incubator's clear walls toward the dragon. Sarah watched in amazement as Keeper carefully extended one enormous claw and touched the outside of the incubator. Immediately, the monitors attached to the baby showed a spike in neural activity, but not distress, excitement, and contentment. "She knows you," Sarah breathed. "Of course she knows me," Keeper replied. "I've been her guardian since before she was born. Her mother was my bonded partner." Bonded partner? Sarah's medical mind immediately began forming questions. "You mean romantically?" Keeper's laugh was like distant thunder. "Not in the way your species understands such things. Dragons and humans can form bonds that transcend physical form, connections of mind and spirit that allow us to share strength, knowledge, even life force when necessary. The baby's mother was bonded to you. Elena was a remarkable human, a scholar who spent years studying my kind. Over time, we formed a connection deeper than friendship, but different from what humans call love. When she became pregnant, we both knew the child would be special." Sarah looked down at the baby, who was still reaching toward Keeper with obvious delight. "Special how? She carries both heritages within her. Human adaptability and emotion combined with draconic longevity and mental abilities. She will be the first of a new kind of being if she is allowed to develop properly." The implications hit Sarah like a thunderbolt. That's why her neural development is so accelerated. That's why her DNA shows unusual markers. And that is why she needs protection, Keeper continued. "There will be those among both our species who see her as a threat to the natural order. Others who will want to study her like a laboratory specimen rather than raise her as the child she is." Agent Williams had been recording the entire conversation from a discreet distance. Now she approached, flanked by military officials Sarah didn't recognize. "Dr. Chun," the agent called out, "we need to discuss the infant status. There are national security implications here." Keeper's eyes narrowed as he watched the group approach. "And so begins," he rumbled. "Agent Williams," Sarah said, not moving away from the incubator, "what national security implications? If this child has the abilities you're suggesting, she could represent either a significant asset or a significant threat. Either way, she needs to be in a secure facility where she can be properly monitored. She needs to be in a loving home where she can grow up normally," Sarah shot back. "She's a baby, not a weapon. A baby with potentially unlimited lifespan and psychic abilities, counter to man in a general's uniform. We have protocols for this kind of situation." Keeper's wings rustled ominously. "Your protocols are irrelevant. The child remains under my protection until suitable guardians are chosen. I will not allow her to be taken to your laboratories. And if we order you to surrender the child?" Keeper rose to his full height, wings spreading wide enough to cast the entire parking lot in shadow. When he spoke, his voice carried a power that made every human present step backward involuntarily. "You may attempt to take her," he said, each word carefully measured. "But understand that I am older than your civilization, stronger than your weapons, and bound by an oath that transcends your authority. I have watched empires rise and fall. I have seen species extinct themselves through arrogance and fear. I will not permit you to add this child to that list." The military officials began reaching for their weapons, but Agent Williams raised a hand to stop them. "Let's everyone calm down. Dr. Chun, perhaps you could help us understand what the dragon means by suitable guardians." Sarah looked between the baby, who had fallen asleep peacefully despite the tension around her, and Keeper, whose ancient eyes held depths of patience and determination that humankind was only beginning to understand. "Keeper," she said quietly, "what would you need to see to know that she was safe?" "Someone who understands her dual nature," he replied, his voice returning to its normal rumbling tone. "Someone who can guide her as she develops abilities your kind has never seen. Someone who will love her for who she is, not fear what she might become. And do you have someone in mind?" Keeper's gaze fixed on Sarah with unmistakable meaning. "I believe I do." Sarah felt her heart skip. "Me? But I'm not. I mean, I don't have experience with children. I work constantly. My apartment is tiny, and I know nothing about raising a child with dragon heritage." "You were the first human to show her kindness," Keeper said gently. "You risked your safety to help a stranger child because it was the right thing to do. You have defended her from those who would use her. Most importantly, you see her as a person, not a curiosity." Agent Williams stepped closer. "Dr. Chun, we can't allow a civilian to adopt a child with unknown and potentially dangerous abilities. And I cannot allow you to imprison a baby because of those same abilities," Keeper growled. "The choice is simple. Dr. Chun adopts the child, and I teach her to control her heritage, or I take her far from here where your governments cannot reach." Sarah's mind reeled. Adopt the baby? She had never seriously considered having children, had always been too focused on her career, too dedicated to her work saving other people's lives. But looking down at the peaceful face in the incubator, she felt something shift inside her chest. "If I did this," she said slowly, "if I adopted her, what would that mean exactly?" "It would mean you become her legal guardian," Agent Williams said. "But there would have to be conditions. Regular checkups, monitoring of her development, protocols in place if she shows dangerous abilities. And it would mean," Keeper added, "that I remain nearby to guide her education in ways your schools cannot provide. She will need to learn to control abilities that could be overwhelming without proper instruction." Sarah looked around the parking lot full of military equipment and scientific instruments, then down at the baby who slept so trustingly in her incubator. This child had already changed everything just by existing. Whatever choice Sarah made now would shape not just one little girl's future, but potentially the relationship between two species. "I need to think about this," she said finally. "Of course," Keeper agreed. "But do not think too long. Others are coming who may not be as reasonable as these officials. Word of the child's existence is spreading, and not everyone who seeks her will have good intentions." As if to emphasize his point, Sarah's phone buzzed with an emergency alert. "All hospital staff report unusual military aircraft approaching from the north. Heightened security protocols now in effect." Agent Williams cursed under her breath as she listened to her earpiece. "That's not our aircraft," she told the gathered officials. "We have unidentified vehicles approaching at high speed." Keeper's head snapped toward the northern sky, and his golden eyes began to glow with inner fire. "Elena's enemies," he growled. "They have found us sooner than I hoped." "What enemies?" Sarah demanded, but even as she spoke, she was already pushing the incubator back toward the hospital entrance. "The purists," Keeper replied, his voice carrying a note of ancient hatred. "Dragons who believe our species should remain separate from humans. They killed Elena to prevent the birth of a hybrid child. Now, they come to finish what they started." In the distance, Sarah could see dark shapes against the sky, aircraft that moved with impossible speed and agility. But as they grew closer, she realized they weren't aircraft at all. They were dragons. 3 of them, their scales black as midnight, wings beating with the force of hurricanes as they approached the hospital. "Get the baby inside," Keeper roared, rising to meet the approaching threat. "Protect her at all costs." Sarah ran for the hospital entrance, pushing the incubator ahead of her while chaos erupted in the parking lot behind them. Military personnel shouted orders, weapons were raised, and Keeper launched himself into the sky with a sound like thunder. As the automatic doors closed behind her, Sarah could hear the battle beginning outside, the clash of ancient powers that humanity was witnessing for the first time. She looked down at the baby, who had awakened, and was watching the ceiling with those unnaturally intelligent eyes. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, though her hands were shaking. "Keeper won't let anything happen to you." But even as she spoke, she realized that the decision about adoption might be taken out of her hands entirely. If these purest dragons succeeded in their attack, there might not be anyone left to protect this special little girl. The thought filled Sarah with a fierce determination she had never felt before. She might not know much about raising children, and she certainly didn't know anything about dragon heritage, but she did know one thing. No one was going to hurt this baby while she had breath in her body. Not governments, not scientists, and certainly not a group of dragons who couldn't see past their own prejudice to recognize the miracle lying peacefully in her arms. Outside, the battle raged on, and Sarah-chan made her choice. The battle above St. Mary's Hospital lasted only minutes, but it changed everything. Sarah held baby Jane close to her chest as the building shook from the impact of massive bodies colliding in the sky above. Through the reinforced windows of the pediatric ward, she could see flashes of fire and the dark silhouettes of dragons locked in aerial combat. Keeper fought with the fury of a guardian protecting his most precious charge. His blue-black scales gleamed as he maneuvered between two of the attacking purest dragons, using his superior knowledge of the local terrain to force them away from the hospital. The third attacker tried to circle around and approach the building directly, but found his path blocked by Keeper's sweeping tail and a torrent of flame that lit up the night sky. "All patients to interior rooms." Dr. Martinez's voice echoed through the hospital's PA system. "This is not a drill." Sarah refused to move from her position by the window. If something happened to Keeper, she needed to know. The baby in her arms seemed equally riveted by the battle above, her unusual golden-flecked eyes tracking the movement of the dragons with impossible precision for a newborn. "Come on, Keeper," Sarah whispered. "You promised to protect her." As if responding to her words, Keeper suddenly changed tactics. Instead of fighting defensively, he shot upward like a rocket, forcing the three purists to follow. Once they were high enough that any falling debris would miss the hospital, he turned and engaged all three simultaneously. What followed was the most beautiful and terrible thing Sarah had ever witnessed. Dragons moved through the sky like living fighter jets, their ancient grace combined with power that made human military technology look primitive. Fire lit the darkness as they breathed concentrated energy at each other, their roars shaking windows for miles around. But Keeper was outnumbered 3-1, and even Sarah's untrained eye could see he was beginning to tire. One of the purists managed to rake claws across his flank, sending droplets of silver blood spinning toward the earth. Another caught his wing with a blast of flame that sent him spiraling momentarily out of control. Just when it seemed the purists might overwhelm their opponent, something unexpected happened. The baby in Sarah's arms let out a cry. Not the normal wail of a distressed infant, but something that carried across impossible distances and reached the ears of every dragon in the sky. The effect was instantaneous. All four dragons stopped fighting and turned toward the hospital building. The purists hovered in the air, their massive heads tilted as if listening to something Sarah couldn't hear. Keeper immediately began descending toward the hospital, his movements urgent but careful. "That's impossible," breathed Dr. Patel, who had joined Sarah at the window. "She's 3 days old. How could she communicate with them?" Sarah looked down at the baby, who had stopped crying and was now making soft cooing sounds while gazing upward. "I don't think she was communicating," she said slowly. "I think she was calling for help." As if to prove her point, the eastern sky began to lighten, not with dawn, which was still hours away, but with the approach of more dragons. Dozens of them, their scales gleaming gold and silver and deep red in the moonlight. They moved in formation like a military squadron, and Their intent was unmistakable. The three purest dragons suddenly found themselves vastly outnumbered. For a moment, they held their position, as if considering whether to continue their attack despite the odds. Then, the largest of them let out a roar that sounded like frustrated rage, and all three began retreating toward the north, flying fast and low to avoid pursuit. The newly arrived dragons circled the hospital once, a gesture that seemed almost like a formal salute, then settled in the surrounding parking lots and streets with the careful precision of beings who had spent centuries learning not to damage human property. Sarah realized she was holding her breath as Keeper landed in his usual spot. Despite the wounds he had suffered in the battle, his first action was to look directly toward the pediatric ward where she stood holding the baby. When their eyes met through the window, Sarah saw relief and something that might have been pride in his ancient gaze. "I think we need to go outside," she told Dr. Patel. "Are you insane? There are dozens of dragons out there now." "Exactly," Sarah said, already heading for the elevator. "And they came when she called them. I think we're about to get some answers." 10 minutes later, Sarah stood in the parking lot surrounded by more magical creatures than most humans ever imagined existed. The dragons had arranged themselves in a rough circle, with Keeper at the center closest to the hospital. Each was magnificent and unique, some sleek and serpentine, others broad and powerful, their scales displaying every color imaginable. An elderly dragon with scales like burnished gold approached Sarah, moving with the careful dignity of great age. When she spoke, her voice was warm and maternal, completely different from Keeper's deep rumble. "I'm Sunweaver," the golden dragon said, "elder of the northern clans and grandmother to many broods. We came as soon as we heard the child's call." "She called you?" Sarah asked, looking down at the baby who seemed completely unimpressed by being surrounded by mythical creatures. "Oh yes," Sunweaver chuckled, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Dragon young learned to call the clan for protection long before they learn to speak. This little one has a particularly strong voice." "But she's human," Sarah protested. "She is both," said another dragon, this one with deep red scales that shimmered like rubies. "I am Firekeeper, bonded brother to Keeper of the Sacred Flame. We have come to witness the first hybrid child and offer our protection." Agent Williams and her team had emerged from the hospital, their weapons lowered, but their expressions wary. "How many of you are there?" the agent asked. "Enough," Sunweaver replied simply. "We have watched from hiding as your species developed, learning your ways, and debating whether contact was wise. The birth of this child changes everything. She represents a bridge between our peoples, if both sides are wise enough to accept it." General Morrison, who had been coordinating the military response, stepped forward. "Are you threatening us?" Firekeeper's laugh was like the crackle of a bonfire. "General, if we meant you harm, do you think your weapons would have stopped us? We are here as guardians, not invaders." "Guardians of what?" "Of the future," Sunweaver said gently. "This child will live for centuries, as dragons do, but she will grow and change and love as humans do. She could become a teacher, helping both our species understand each other. Or she could become a weapon, if fear and mistrust drive her to it." Sarah felt the weight of those words as she looked down at the peacefully sleeping baby. "So what happens now?" "Now," Keeper said, carefully lowering his injured head until he was at Sarah's eye level, "we must decide her future. The purists will return in greater numbers and with more dangerous intent. She cannot remain here." "But she needs medical care," Sarah protested. "She's still so young and fragile." "Dragon young are hardier than human infants," Sunweaver assured her. "And we have healers among our kind. She will be safe in our mountain strongholds, where the purists cannot reach her." "You want to take her away from humans entirely?" Agent Williams interjected. "That seems counterproductive if she's supposed to be a bridge between species." "Not away from humans," Firekeeper clarified. "Away from danger. Until she is old enough to protect herself and make her own choices about where she belongs. Sarah felt her heart clench at the thought of losing the baby she was already thinking of as her daughter. How long would that be? Perhaps 10 years, Sunweaver said. Long enough for her to learn to control her abilities and understand her heritage. 10 years. Sarah's voice cracked. She'd forget me completely. Dragons do not forget those who show them kindness, Keeper said gently. And hybrid children remember even more clearly than full dragons. But there's another possibility. All eyes turned to him. What possibility? You could come with her, he said simply. Be her mother in truth, not just in documentation. Live among us, and learn our ways while teaching her yours. The suggestion hit Sarah like a physical blow. Leave everything she had worked for her entire adult life? Abandon her career, her apartment, her whole world to raise a half-dragon child in some mountain stronghold? I couldn't, she whispered. I'm a doctor. My patients need me. My life is here. Your life, Sunweaver said with infinite gentleness, is what you choose to make it. We do not ask lightly, but this child will need someone who understands both compassion and strength, someone who has dedicated their life to healing and protecting others. Agent Williams stepped closer. Dr. Chun, you don't have to make this decision now. We can provide protection, set up a secure facility where the child can grow up safely among her own species. Her own species? Firekeeper's voice carried a dangerous edge. Which species would that be, human? She belongs to both, and neither. I meant dash. You meant to cage her, Keeper interrupted, his wounds forgotten in the face of this new threat. Study her like a laboratory animal and train her to serve your government's interests. The baby in Sarah's arms began to fuss, picking up on the tension around her. Without thinking, Sarah began the gentle swaying motion that had soothed countless infants during her years in pediatrics. The tiny girl settled immediately, one small hand grasping Sarah's finger with surprising strength. Looking down at that perfect little face, Sarah realized that her heart had already made the choice her mind was still struggling with. This wasn't just any baby anymore. This was her daughter in every way that mattered. The thought of government agents raising her in a sterile facility or of losing her to dragon politics she didn't understand was unbearable. If I came with you, she said slowly, could I continue practicing medicine? Your people must get sick or injured sometimes. We have much to learn from human medical knowledge, Sunweaver admitted, and you would have the first opportunity to study dragon physiology in detail. It would be educational for both sides, and the baby would grow up knowing both worlds. She would be the first true citizen of both worlds, Keeper confirmed. Raised by humans, but educated in dragon lore. Protected by our strength, but guided by your compassion. Sarah looked around at the dozens of dragons waiting patiently for her decision. Then, at the government officials who were clearly planning to make the choice for her if she didn't act quickly. Finally, she looked down at the baby who had somehow become the center of this monumental moment. Okay, she said quietly. I'll do it, but I have conditions. Name them, Sunweaver said immediately. I want to finish training my replacement here at the hospital. Give me 2 weeks to transition my patients and get my affairs in order. And I want regular contact with the human world, letters, phone calls, whatever's possible. Granted, Firekeeper rumbled. Anything else? Sarah took a deep breath. I want her to have a real name. Not Jane Doe, not Subject Alpha, not whatever the government would call her. A name that honors both her heritages. Keeper's golden eyes brightened. Do you have something in mind? Sarah smiled, looking down at the baby whose unusual eyes seemed to hold depths of intelligence and possibility. Elena, she said, for her mother. Elena Starweaver. Elena because she's human, Starweaver because she's going to connect 2 worlds that have been separate for too long. Elena Starweaver, Sunweaver repeated, and somehow the name sounded musical in her ancient voice. It is a good name, a name worthy of legends. Agent Williams stepped forward urgently. Dr. Chun, you can't just disappear with a child of unknown capabilities. There are protocols, legal procedures. Your protocols, Keeper interrupted with finality. "End here. The child has been claimed by both species, and we recognize Dr. Chen's right to raise her. Try to interfere, and you will discover just how protective dragons can be." To emphasize the point, every dragon in the parking lot turned their massive heads toward the government officials. The message was unmistakable. This was not a negotiation. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood at her apartment window for the last time, holding Elena and watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and pink. Her replacement at the hospital was settling in well. Her lease had been terminated, and her belongings had been reduced to a few precious items that would fit in a dragon's saddlebags. Elena had grown noticeably in just 2 weeks. Her development accelerated far beyond normal human rates. She was already tracking objects clearly, responding to voices, and occasionally making sounds that seemed almost like attempts at words. Most remarkably, she had begun to glow very faintly when content, a soft golden light that emanated from her skin like captured starlight. A gentle knock at the door announced Keeper's arrival. Despite his massive size, he had learned to take human form when necessary. Still tall and imposing, with golden eyes that betrayed his true nature, but able to navigate human spaces when needed. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Sarah looked around the apartment that had been her sanctuary for 5 years, then down at the baby who had become her whole world in just 16 days. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "I'm leaving everything I know to raise a child I don't understand in a world I've never seen." "That," Keeper said with a smile that transformed his usually serious face, "sounds like exactly the kind of challenge you were born for." Sarah laughed despite her nerves. "How do you know?" "Because you didn't hesitate when she needed medical care. You didn't back down when officials tried to take her away. And you didn't let fear stop you from making the hardest decision of your life." He moved closer, his presence somehow comforting despite his otherworldly nature. "Elena chose well when she called to you that first night. She chose. Dragons always choose their families," Keeper explained. "Even the very young ones. She could have been silent, could have accepted whatever fate others decided for her. Instead, she cried out for help and accepted comfort from the first human to offer it. That was her choosing you to be her mother." As if responding to her name, Elena gurgled and reached tiny hands toward Keeper. He extended one finger, normal-sized in his human form, but still radiating warmth that spoke of his true nature, and she grasped it with both hands. "Hello, little star," he murmured. "Ready to see your new home?" Outside, Sunweaver waited in the early morning light, her golden scales catching the sunshine like a living jewel. Other dragons had come to escort them to the mountain stronghold that would become their new home. Beings of incredible power and ancient wisdom who had accepted a human doctor as one of their own for the sake of a baby who represented hope for both species. Sarah gathered her small bag of belongings and settled Elena into the specially designed carrier that would keep her safe during flight. As they prepared to leave the world she had always known behind, she felt Elena's tiny hand wrap around her finger with that same surprising strength that had captured her heart 2 weeks ago. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Sarah whispered as they walked toward the waiting dragons. "We're going home." And somehow, despite all the uncertainty ahead, she knew it was true. Home wasn't a place, it was wherever this remarkable little girl needed her to be. As Sunweaver gently lifted them into the sky and the city fell away below, Sarah Chun began the greatest adventure of her life, guided by love and the unshakable conviction that some bridges were worth building, no matter how impossible they seemed. Elena cooed happily as they soared higher, her golden-flecked eyes reflecting the morning sun while her dragon guardians carried them toward a future that would redefine what it meant to be human, dragon, or something wonderfully new.